Hi everyone. In this video, I am going to talk about how Vipassana meditation helps with persistent sadness associated with depression. And that's the sadness, in my view, that is the persistent one that just doesn't have a reason, right? It's not like you broke up with someone. It's not like somebody died. It's not like, you lost your job or some event happened to make you sad. It's that persistent sadness that's just there all the time and doesn't have a cause. So I will be talking about that in this video. So I'll start with my experience. And again, I'm just talking from my own perspective. I'm not a professional. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. None of this. This is just my own personal experience with depression, with sadness, and how Vipassana meditation helped me answer some of those challenging problems that arise from that persistent sadness, So the first way that Vipassana really helped me in the past and in the current moment and in the future deal with these is the first idea of being aware, right? Developing the awareness and then being aware of what is making me sad. And with this persistent sadness that, sometimes I'm just like, man, life is just miserable, or I just have a gloomy outlook. It helps me recognize where that's coming from. Although it's not an event like, oh, I lost my house or something. It can be, oh, there's a past trauma. There's a traumatic event that happened in my childhood or last year or whenever that this sadness is coming from. And it just doesn't seem that way, right? My memory isn't replaying that, but that's where it's coming from. Or it could be I'm having a overly pessimistic outlook on life in general. And so really recognizing, is it a thought? Is it an outlook? Is it a personality trait? Like, am I being overly sensitive? Am I being overly reactive? Is my worldview, all these things, and really thinking, having the ability and the awareness to understand where it's coming from. Even if it is a vague one, even if it's, something in the past is itching me, right? So that is the number one way that Vipassana really helps with coming to terms and really coming to understand what that sadness is. So the other thing that it really helps with is with emotional regulation. And that's really when it comes to sadness, even in the depressive state, it's really important to not get overwhelmed, right? Because when I get depressed, it's like that persistent sadness just makes me so gloomy, and it makes me want to give up on life, and it makes me feel so hopeless, right? And because I'm not able to handle it, I'm not able to hold that emotional space for that sadness, it leads to me to keep reacting and to get further sad and to develop into hopelessness and potentially even, so deep that I want to get out and, just unlife, So how does Vipassana help with emotional regulation? So it does that in many different ways. The first one is being aware of the entirety of the sadness, where it's coming from, how intense it is, and all these things that, an increased awareness brings. And the other one is really looking and understanding as you develop in Vipassana, really understanding the impermanent nature of things, right? Things come up, feelings come up, situations come up, and then they pass. The breath comes in and the breath goes out. It comes and it goes. And every situation in life comes and goes. And so in that wisdom is to really understand that the sadness is here for a while and then it will go away. Now, is that a while? A few hours, a few days, a few months, a few years, a lifetime, but at the end of the day, it is impermanent as well. So developing this wisdom really creates a subtler, quieter relationship with sadness and really any other emotion. And that allows the strength to really hold that emotion. Because what really ends up happening, right, is, let's say the sadness arises and then you start to have aversion towards it, meaning you don't want that feeling to be there. You want to push it away. You want it to not be there because it's ruining your day, right? And so this aversion, this reaction of aversion of not wanting it there is like pushing it away. It's like just burying it. And that leads to more pain, right? Because emotions aren't meant to be buried. They will come out one way or the other. And the more that you force it down, the bigger the explosion is going to be. And it's just going to continue to overwhelm you. So Vipassana helps with having less aversion towards the sadness, to say, okay, I'm not going to push you away, and I'm going to have the strength to not do that. Because that, as an idea, you could just be like, okay, I'm not going to be averse to my emotions. But when it comes to the actual reality of in the moment, I mean, your reaction is non-knowledge based. Your reaction is like, I don't know, consciousness based or experiential based, right? It's like, how do you not be averse? How do you not hate your sadness? You know, how do you not push your sadness away and say, why is this happening to me? I wish, you know, if only, and like having these start to loop. So by decreasing the aversion, you're able to see the sadness and just hold the sadness. And that really starts the healing process, right? So the awareness lets you understand the intensity of the sadness, maybe the underlying causes of the sadness. Then the emotional regulation and understanding of impermanence really helps you to develop, a better emotional relationship in terms of attachment to it, and your attachment doesn't have a lot of aversion. And what that allows you to do is to be able to hold that emotion so that the healing process can begin. And that, underlying cause could be whatever. But if you are too fearful, if you're too afraid, then the healing cannot begin, right? Let's use the example of a traumatic event that happened in the past. If you're so reactive, if any of that really comes up and you just keep pushing it away, it'll just be pushed down. And then your subconscious will do some tricks to make you forget it. And it will like just keep pushing it down all the way down. And it's going to keep popping up. And for your whole adult life, it could be something that you keep pushing down and it keeps negatively impacting your life and your relationships and the way that you relate to it. So, healing it is very important. And that the skills that Vipassana develop, has allowed me in the past and present and future to be able to hold the feeling of sadness, to be able to see the underlying causes, and to be able to start holding the space. So now, once you're holding the space and you're able to, be with the sadness for longer and longer periods of time, the next steps becomes, solving it. And solving it might look like, journaling. You start to journal and really think about all the things surrounding that past event. Or if it's a mindset of, overly pessimistic, you start to really think and say, okay, is my pessimism actually true? Right? And the thing with pessimism is, it could be true, right? It's true that there's tragedies in the world. Maybe you're, seeing news all over and there's all these tragedies happening. And then you start to have an outlook on life that's, oh, life is all horrible. Life is so unjust and all these things. And then you start to spiral downwards and you start feeling hopeless and all of these things. But I want to push back against that because yes, tragedies in life happen all the time. And also, beautiful, amazing, humane, ethereal things happen every single day as well, right? That is just life. There is both. There's the negative and there's the positive and there's both, right? And so if you're overly pessimistic and you're only focusing on the negative and you're saying, well, life is horrible, you're missing out. You're not being realistic. You're not looking at the bigger picture. And we all know that we only make the best decisions when we're able to see the bigger picture, right? And so Vipassana gives you, in terms of pessimism, gives you that ability to first be aware that, oh, wow, I'm being overly pessimistic and overly focusing on a certain aspect of life or a certain aspect of this event or that event. And then allows you to have that bigger picture to see reality as it is. And once you see reality as it is, you're neither too pessimistic or too optimistic, but somewhere, realistic, somewhere in the middle, or sometimes skewed this way, sometimes skewed that way. It doesn't matter. So having this ability to really see things as they are is another important emphasized part of Vipassana. So when it comes to mental things contributing to that persistent sadness, like low self-esteem or pessimism, as I'm talking about, Vipassana really helps you logically try to understand and come to a better perspective of what is influencing these things. And once you're able to do that, you can start to really think, with thoughts, it's a lot easier. You can start to be like, well, are my thoughts logical? Are they reasonable? Are they taken into consideration all available data? So that starts the healing process for mental things. For emotional things, it could just be like talking out of what happened in your childhood, what happened for, whatever caused that emotional scar. It might be going to therapy, it might be just talking to your best friend. And once you start healing, and once you start changing the thought patterns and the beliefs and the views of it, you start to really heal and come out of it. And, these are all essential skills that are needed that Vipassana really emphasizes and really develops, right? And so that's how it ultimately helps with that persistent sadness. And now I've got a bonus, right? A bonus wisdom that I have learned about sadness. And that wisdom is that sadness is my friend, right? This might seem counterintuitive, but if you think about it, as I thought about it, sadness is really, and really all other emotions as well, sadness wants me to be happy. And now that sounds like, well, what are you talking about? Like how sadness is literally the opposite of happiness. I actually don't know if it is, but anyway, it's they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. How is it that sadness wants me to be happy? And so I will share, my own personal story. Like, let's say I was born in Kenya. And in Kenya, I was born in Ethiopia. Sorry about that. I was born in Ethiopia, raised up Ethiopia and Kenya. And there was a lot of violence towards kids. I think I've mentioned this in a video. And that violence, it used to be all over the world. I mean, even in America, not so long ago, teachers would, spank the kids at school if they're misbehaving and all of that. So basically that's what it was when I was growing up in the early 2000s in Kenya. Teachers would, discipline you through force, through violence. I don't condone it, but at the same time, I understand that, that was just how things were happening. So that had a massive impact on my outlook in life, right? There was a lot of trauma associated with that, and luckily nowadays in Ethiopia, Kenya, they're moving more away from this. And I think in general, the whole world is sort of moving away from using, physical power to enforce behavior or, however you want to call it. And so how this taught me that sadness is my friend is, I think for a long time, I would the thought or the memory would arise of this past event. I would get extremely upset. I would get sad. I would get, I would feel a certain kind of way. And of course I would want to push it down and not think about it and, come up with all sorts of excuses. And of course, throughout time, it'll keep popping up and the sadness persists until I looked at it and I started to heal from it, right? I started to process it. I started to think about it. I started to forgive. I started to understand. I started to have compassion, right? I went through my own healing process. And as I healed from it, it no longer had the power over me that it did when it was unhealed, right? Because I resolved it. And what happened was I stopped being sad about it. Right? I stopped being sad about this traumatic series of events that happened to me. And I stopped being sad just like that because I healed, I did the work. And now what this taught me about my sadness, right, is when it was there when I didn't heal it, when I didn't work on that past traumatic event. And so that sadness was a signal, right? It was trying to signal to me, hey, you have some unresolved trauma. You have something holding you back. You have something that's influencing you and making you live life less than you could be. And so that sadness was signaling to me, was saying, hey, you need to heal this shit. right now. And it would be persistent, right? It wouldn't go away. Like, of course, the subconscious would push it down for a bit, but it would pop up again. The sadness would come along with it. Then it would go down. And then at the time that I healed it, then the sadness stopped coming. Now, if I remember, the event, I'm like, hey, that is the nature of what happened. That's the reality of what happened. And, it's okay. Like, it contributed to who I am. It contributed to make me the person that I am today. And I am okay with it. I am not condoning it. I'm not saying, oh, people were justified in what they did. But I have accepted it and I've embraced it as that was a part of my life back then. And I have let go of any negative emotional associations with it. I don't think the world is messed up because that happened to me. I don't think, that, I just don't have a lot of negative thoughts around it because I've healed. And now the sadness has gone away. So now whenever I feel sadness in the present, I look at it as it's signaling me. It's signaling to me something, and it wants me to do something. It wants me to do something that will resolve issues, that will move things in a brighter direction. And so now whenever I feel sadness, I look at it and I'm quite happy when it comes because it's trying to tell me something. And if I can listen to it, and then if I can take the steps necessary to resolve whatever it's trying to signal to me, then it goes away, right? So sadness for me now only pops up when something is going wrong, when something, either it could be an external event or it could be an internal event, right? It could be another signal that I have more unresolved trauma, that my mind is now ready to deal with deeper issues, right? And so now when it comes, it's like, oh, this is a good friend. This is a good signal. This is something that is here to make me have a better life. And really, with a lot of the emotions that we feel that we consider negative, or at least that I used to consider negative, sadness, irritation, all of these things, now it's like through the development of Vipassana and through the development of looking at it and being able to, have that self-awareness and self-understanding, I'm able to really have a different relationship with emotions. And now I don't consider any emotions negative, right? I don't consider them bad. I don't consider them, any of this like this. They're all there to serve a purpose. And if I can align myself with the purpose that they're trying to serve, then we're having a relationship. We have a partnership to create the best life for me, right? And so it's like, these are not punishments. Sadness is not a punishment. It's really a signal to what needs to change and how to make it better, and putting all of that work into it. So yeah, just to wrap it up, I want to also talk about how Vipassana, the practice of Vipassana, leads and wants you to cultivate compassion, loving kindness, compassion. And that feeling, that aspiration to share the goodness, to share the harmony within yourself, really also taps into that connectivity that we have with other human beings to feel good, to help each other, to nurture each other, and to do all of these things, which really also helps with persistent feelings of sadness, right? So outside of resolving the sadness, understanding the sadness, and doing all of that, there's also this other piece, which is to create feelings of love, to create feelings of harmony with other human beings and with other beings in general. And this creates this dichotomy of, the sadness is helping me appreciate the goodness, and the goodness is helping me appreciate the sadness, and this interrelated connectedness, and sadness is trying to help me. It's not making me an enemy, and really tapping into that. Now if I see something that makes me sad, like I see war, I channel my metta, I channel my loving kindness and say, my sadness, the sadness that I feel from reading this story, is developing a lot of empathy in me. And from that empathy, I wish for you to heal, to come out of this and to do this, and now the sadness is tied into the loving kindness that I'm reaching out into the world. Whereas before, the sadness will come, I'll have the empathy, and then I'll start to say, man, the world is messed up. Things aren't going well. Everything is going to shit. Let's destroy everything. And it starts this negative loop that doesn't help anybody, because now they're sad, they're suffering. And now from my own thought patterns, I'm making myself suffer as well. And two people suffering is like twice the negative impact, right? So when it leads to love, when that empathy from the sadness leads to love and joy, that puts me in a better position to have a better life, in order to, and even like sending love to the other person. It's like, it's a lot better to be sending love and prayers to this person than it is for me to also be condemning the world and to, start a rampage and do all of these things. And that might be my own view. So anyway, Vipassana really helps with persistent sadness that is caused by depression, through enhanced self-awareness, through emotional regulation, through better, to less attachment, less aversion towards emotions, having more space for emotions, healing the emotion, healing the trauma, healing whatever it is, resolving the worldview or whatever thought patterns it might be, and then ultimately developing loving kindness, compassion as well. So these are all the ways that it's helped. I think Vipassana has just been really special in my life and has been really helping me to be the best that I can be. So I hope that Vipassana is also able to help you. If you're feeling persistently sad, of course, go to a therapist, go reach out to resources. And this can also be a resource, in the ways that I mentioned. If you want to put in the work, if you want to meditate, if you want to develop these skills, it can really help make sure that you're self-empowered to heal, self-empowered to have the best mind. And by best mind, I just mean a mind that feels good to be in versus, sadness and doesn't feel that great. So at the end of the day, I really hope that you come out of this feeling a little inspired. Maybe you want to take your course. Maybe you want to restart your meditation practice. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please leave a comment. I hope you have a wonderful day.